Hey, welcome to Ones and Zeros. My name's Ben, and today we are going to be looking at episode number 6 of our Unearthing C++ series. In today's episode, I'm going to be taking a look at arrays and what arrays are, some of the different uses for them, how they can be handy, and just sort of get a bit of a feel for them. So, much like we've done for all of our Unearthing C++ videos so far, we're going to be using Visual Studio today for our examples and seeing how things work. So let's jump over to that one there and let's have a bit of a look at them. So essentially, we've looked at simple variables so far in some of our videos. So for example, if we were to declare an int and let's just call it variable a just for the sake of it, and we can give that a value as well if we'd like to. So the difference between a standard variable and an array is that an array allows us to hold a list of specific variables. With an array, typically the way it's going to work is that the array is going to hold a list of variables of the same type. So for example, we could tell it that we want to have, we'll call this array A, and then let's tell it that we want it to hold 4 different items. So in this case here, where we have our single variable, that's just holding one single value, in this case holding the value 0. In this case, what we've told it is that we still want to be using the int type, so we want to be storing integers. However, we want to be storing a list of 4 of those, which is what the 4 means within the square brackets, and we can put, different numbers and things like that in there. We'll stick with 4 for the moment. Much like we can assign a value to our single variable here, we can also assign values in a similar way to an array. However, in this case, we'd use some curly brackets, and let's put in the values 0, 1, 2, and 3 into that array. So what that's going to do is tell it for each of those items in turn, these are the 4 values that it's going to put in there. So if we want to sort of see how that actually works and get a bit of a look at it, we'll get it to print this out for us. Let's just go with array A, and we'll tell it just to print the first item of the array, so the array index, which is what this guy is called, will actually start at 0. So in the case of us telling it that we have an array where we want to hold 4 separate values, we're going to have array indexes 0 through to 3, which gives us our 4 separate values. So let's finish that off there. So essentially what should happen here is it's going to then print out the value that is stored in array index 0, which will be the first one in the array here, which should also be 0. So if we print that, if we run that, we can see that it gives us a 0. And just so that you can see that it works for all of those elements in that array that we've created, let's tell it to do that 4 times, except in this case, we're going to go through and we're going to tell it to do it individually, one for each of the 4 elements of that array. Now, we could use a for loop to be able to do this as well, but just as an example, we'll run this and we'll see how that works. So as we can see, it's printed the 0, 1, 2, and 3. That are the 4 values that we stored in the 4 elements of that array. Now, there's a couple of different use cases where I find arrays to be most useful. The first one of those use cases is when you're dealing with strings of characters, specifically C strings. So C++ strings still use and store an array of characters, but they do it a little bit differently than what I want to actually look at in this video. I'd like to do a video specifically on C strings at some stage. In this one, we'll have a look at C style strings rather than C++ style strings, because it kind of makes it a little bit easier to understand based on just the basic concept of what an array is. So let's get rid of what we've got here so far. And we're actually going to create an array of characters. And let's just call this test string. And let's tell it that we want to store 5 characters. And same as what we did before, we're going to assign each of those elements of the array like we did with the numbers. And there's a couple of different ways we can do this as far as strings, but we're going to do it this way first because it makes the most sense based on the example that we just looked at. So in this case, we're telling it that we have an array of 5 elements. The first element, we're putting a capital T in there, then the E, then the S, then the T. Now the thing when you're dealing with a C style string is it needs to have the final element being a 0, or what's known as a null character, in order to terminate the string. So that allows the system to know that that's what the end of the string is, essentially. Otherwise, you can run into sort of issues with buffer overflows and things like that. So in this case, let's also get it to print this out for us. However, this time around, rather than giving it an array index in here, I'm just going to give it test string. And we'll pop our end line in there, and let's run that one. And as we can see, we get the word test coming out because it's printing out each of those elements of the array in turn. Now, this kind of brings us back to our last episode where we were talking about pointers as well, because essentially what we've handed it here, because we're not actually giving it an array index, which we could do. We could, say for example, just tell it to print that first character, and if we run that, then we should just get the capital letter T, like so. But by not giving it an array index here, we're essentially handing it a pointer into that points at the first element of the array. So going back to that previous episode, this here is effectively a pointer just like the pointers that we were looking at previously. It's just we're not assigning it like we would with a pointer, because it works a little bit differently when we're dealing with an array. Now, we can also, so let's do another one, and we'll call this test string 2. We'll also fill this with 5 characters. We'll do it the same as we did with the first one, but because we're dealing with a string of characters, we can also just tell it that we want to put in an actual string like that, rather than having to put in each of the individual characters like we have here. And the other benefit of doing it this way is that it automatically puts in that null character, or the 0, for us at the end of it. So we still need to give it enough space to be able to store the 4 characters of the word test plus the null character, which is why we still need to give it 5 elements for that array in order for things to work correctly. But if we go ahead and we'll just copy this, and we'll tell it to print test string and test string 2, one after the other, and we run that, we should get the same result for both of those, just like so. So that's kind of the first really useful use case for arrays, is being able to store text. The other really useful use case for strings comes down to performance reasons. So there'll be certain times when, say we have, let's just assign some global variables, and let's call these option A, and we'll just assign these some hexadecimal values. just randomly throw them in there. So if you've dealt with dealing with 32-bit color values in hexadecimal, you might recognize this sort of style. It'd be something sort of similar that you would use in that situation. And then let's also create another one called option index, and we'll assign that the value 0 for the moment. So we'll get rid of our bits there for the moment. And let's, to make things a little bit easier, also create a bit of a function that we're just going to call print option. And we'll pass that an integer, and we'll just call that option, make it nice and easy. Sorry, copy's still syncing in this evening. And we'll just get it so that it will actually print out that particular option for us. Which that function is just going to make it a little bit easier to be able to demonstrate what I'm talking about with this. So what we could do, and we're missing some semicolons there, which certainly is not going to help, so we'll fix those guys up. So we could say if option index equals 0, then print option, and we'll pass it option A, else might just copy and paste a bit of this stuff just to make that a little bit quicker. Fix up some of these indents. Now typically I'd also put the else's in here rather than at the end like I have. Just kind of rushing through it at the moment, so we'll get rid of these ones at the end. Make sure we format the code properly and hit all of the right keys as we're doing it. It's probably also a good thing. Okay, so go with D, C, B, and then we'll change that to 1, 2, and 3. So essentially what this would do is, based on the value that's sitting in option index, it would then decide which of these 4 options it's going to print. Now, in this situation, it's kind of a waste of CPU cycles to go through and do if statements like that, nested in that way. It certainly works, and we can see, say, if we were to change this to option index 2, we should get option C printing out. Let's change these values actually so that they look the same when we go to actually print them. So let's call it 100, 200, 300, and 400. Like so. And then if we run that, so we can see it's figured out that we had option index 2 selected, which means that we wanted it to print option C. Now the processor had to go through in that particular situation and go, was it equal to 0? No. Was it equal to 1? No. Was it equal to 2? Okay, it was equal to 2, so then we want to print option C. So what we could also do, rather than having to do it that way and using the if statements that way, is we could actually just declare this as, let's just call this options. We'll make it an array of 4 elements, and then we're just going to put in our 100, 200, 300, and 400 into the array like so. So let's comment out this stuff for the moment. And rather than doing that and wasting a bunch of CPU clock cycles for no reason, what we can then do is turn around and go print option, give it options, and then use our option index as our index into that array. So we've got our array index, which is indexing into our options array of our 4 values, which is then being passed to our print option. So in this situation, we should still get 300 printing because our option index is still 2. But this time we're dealing with something that's going to be a lot more efficient. So same result, but as far as if you're doing something, especially with microcontrollers where you've got something that is being done a ton of times continuously, saving even those bunch of clock cycles by using an array in that situation rather than a bunch of if statements, or even using a switch case style selection, you're going to find that it's actually much more efficient doing it using arrays. Now, this is something that we're going to get into a bit more once we start to look at things like structures and things like that as well. But you can also do things like having arrays of pointers and things like that as well, which can also allow you to sort of leverage that extra bit of performance and things like that too. So that's kind of as far as I really wanted to go into arrays for the moment, sort of just give you a bit of an idea of what they are, some of the ways that they can be used, and some of the reasons why you might use them. So say in the case of C-style strings, or being able to index into arrays of particular things. It's a particular style that you will see being used in the STM32 videos that I've been doing as well. So some of the basics videos and things like that. In those videos, you may also see that I use what are known as enums to be able to index into arrays as well, which enums are also something that we're going to be touching on in one of the videos coming up soon as well. So hope you've enjoyed that one, and hope that that's kind of given you a bit of an idea about that if it was something that you were new to. If you do have any questions or anything like that, definitely feel free to leave a bit of feedback. Love it if you liked and subscribed on YouTube or gave us a follow on Twitch. Definitely good to see the new subscribers and followers that have been coming along. Definitely means a lot that people have actually been enjoying the content. And also feel free to jump onto our subreddit, so r/ones and zeros. If you've got any questions or anything like that, happy to answer them there as well as on YouTube. So got those details down there somewhere. And you can also get in touch at the Gmail address onesandzeros.contact@gmail.com as well. So thanks very much for watching. Hope you're having a great day or night, evening, morning, whatever it is, wherever you are in the world. And see you next time.